My Adoption is for all people touched by adoption in any way. We're going to dive into all aspects of the process with the hope of uniting and supporting our adoption community.
Welcome to My Adoption. My name is Courtney. I am an adoptee and now work as a writer and editor.
Hi, and my name is Kaytlin. I am a birth mother and I work with the expectant mothers with Adoption.com.
Awesome. So this is our first podcast. We are super nervous, but we're really excited to help people tell their stories and kind of get into the back end of adoption that we don't hear much about. Check us out on Adoption.org, Adoption.com, Adoption on Instagram and Facebook, all the places. Go follow us and like our stuff. We would really appreciate it. But today we're just going to try and get to know Kaytlin a little bit better. She is our birth mom at Adoption.com and she has a great story. So we're just going to get into it. So what was your experience with adoption before your pregnancy ever happened? What was your perspective of it?
I didn't really have one other than the fact that my mom's adopted, and that's really as far as it went. Her adoption was through the foster system, completely different than my experience. So, I felt good about it. I've always loved the idea of adoption. I always planned on adopting as I got older, but it wasn't something I thought I'd have to think about at 18,
Yeah, definitely. Is it something that like you and your mom talked about a lot, or was it just that's part of our story and that was kind of it?
Yeah, it was just kind of, that's part of my story. She told me when she was adopted and a little bit about her birth family, but that was it. We just knew it was kind of something like mom's adopted. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you got pregnant, tell us like when that happened and how all of that went down.
Yeah, so I was getting ready for school, my first semester of college, and I went down to kind of start a job and got in contact with an old coworker, and he said, "Hey, let me show you the area." And I was like, "Okay, why not?" And one thing led to another, and we just hung out all the time. We really liked each other. We always flirted when we were working together as kids, and so we ended up, as a couple, and we weren't too far in. I think we were about a month or two maybe into our relationship, and found out I was pregnant. And it was not what we were expecting, that's for sure. So.
And what was your initial reaction like when you found out you were pregnant?
Not great. Seeing how I was 3 days into my first semester of college, and I was like, oh no, like what? I was just kind of in a shock. I was like, I don't even know what to do at this point. I was supposed to be going to school and now I'm pregnant. Like I was just in shock, I'd say.
Would you say it's kind of one of those moments where like your life flashes before your eyes, like you just kind of have to reconsider everything?
Yeah, because I was like, okay, can I do this? Can I continue school? It's only one semester. Like nobody would even know I was pregnant by the end of it. But then I was already like feeling the symptoms of being tired and throwing up, and and I was like, I'm young, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. How am I supposed to support it? Yeah, everything just runs through your head at once.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like an avalanche. Like all of this is coming. I have no way to stop it, and all I can do is like yell for help and try and figure out what my next step is. So who was the first person that you told when you found out you're pregnant?
Yeah, I actually told my mom first. She was actually the one who set up the appointment for me to go get tested to see, like your little pee in a cup. And I called my mom and I was like, "Mom, I'm pregnant." And she was like, "Okay." And I think she called my dad right after that. And then I went to go tell the father.
And who was the scariest person to tell of those three people?
It would have been my dad, but my mom broke the news.
She took care of it.
So that was helpful, yeah.
Was it scary telling your mom? Like, I'd be mortified if it was my mom, but...
Yeah, a little bit. It was more, my mom's always been very open. She's a nurse. She's always been very open about any sort of topics. So I initially called her and I was like, "Hey, what are these symptoms I'm having?" And she was very understanding and, she set up the appointment for me. So It was better than I thought. I'm just glad.
That's so nice.
Tell my dad.
Yeah, I'm so glad you had that support. Like I say, I'd be so scared to tell my mom, but like my mom is the sweetest person in the entire world. And like at the end of the day, like they love us and they just want what's best for us and they're going to support us no matter what it is. So that's really great that you had that. So looking forward, how did your relationship change after that?
Well, it was a bumpy road. It was, we kind of went into go mode a little bit. We were like, okay, adoption is what we're going to do. So I started looking into adoption. I started looking at families. I started looking at all these sort of things. And I told the father about it, and his initial reaction was not good. He had already had a child and was trying to deal with that. And he was young too. We were both so young. And I told him I was going home because I was going to do adoption. And he was pretty upset, but we stayed in a relationship. And so I went home and just tried to make it work. But I just got this huge wall in front of me of like, what if I could make it work? What if I could parent? What if we could do this? And so I actually ended up leaving home and went to go live with the father for a little bit to see how it would work and if we could make it work. And it wasn't too long into that relationship and living together that I realized, okay, I can't do this. I can't do this to this child. This is not the life I want my child to have. This is not the environment I want my child to be raised in. And so I ended up moving back home after that. So it was about 4 months into my pregnancy that I ended up going home again for the second time, but this time for sure.
Yeah, totally. Every adoption is so personal and so different, and you never know what's going on in someone's life. And like initially you thought you went from adoption to let's try and parent. Okay, this isn't working out. And it's a lot of picking and choosing and figuring out what's working best for you. So
it takes time because it's a process, and it's a 9-month emotional process. And you can't, if you go into adoption and that's what you want to do and you go for it, I think that's great. But it's okay to take your time too.
Yeah.
It's okay to consider your options, because I thought to myself, I was like, how could I place my child for adoption without saying that I try? I would always wonder, what if? I would always have that question, what if? So when I originally left to go live with the father, I knew in my head I would be back, but I couldn't go through adoption without saying I tried to make it work with the father. I tried to do it. So, and not everyone's experience is like that, but in my experience, that's what happened. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with how it all turned out.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you have like peace with everything that happened up to the point. I know that it was really hard and that you experienced some hard things, but at the end of the day, like you feel that your journey was what it was supposed to be, even with all those hardships. So that's great. Then you said you went home. What was that like? What was the reactions of people as you got this baby bump and everything that happened?
I was in a small town, so everyone figured it out pretty quickly. Why is she back home from school? Why has she gained weight? But overall, it was really good. I'd have people, maybe some strange faces at work, but when it came to things like going to church or, the people in my community, they were very open, very understanding, very kind. I never had that judgmental feeling from anyone. So they were really understanding and really supportive.
That makes me feel so good. I was adopted back in the 90s, so things were a little different back then. And even in the last 20 years, like, I feel that more and more people are accepting of unplanned pregnancies, like for older and for younger people. And, the reaction is to love and open your arms and support people rather than shun them or shame them, because it doesn't do any good at the end of the day. Giving that love and support is what matters. So that's really awesome. So now you're considering adoption. And I know you kind of looked around a little bit at the beginning of what your options were, but how did you start moving towards choosing a family?
Yeah, so that process was interesting. You'd think that I would, go different routes, like looking at profiles and stuff online. But because the word got out and I was in such a small town, people actually came to us and they were like, hey, I know someone who's adopting, or I know this couple would be great. And so we ended up actually getting a ton of referrals, like all these amazing couples who wanted to adopt. And there was one that just stuck out. They had a friend sent their ebook. They made this little adoption ebook and sent it to us.
This episode on My Adoption is sponsored by the Gladney Center for Adoption. Gladney provides adoption and advocacy services for domestic infant adoption, international adoption, counseling, maternity services, and adoption support. A caseworker can help you learn more about your options, find financial support throughout your pregnancy, and make an adoption plan that works for you. To get started, visit Adoption.org or call 1-800-236-7898.
My mom and I just sat there and just looked through this book of their family and, what was important to them and what they do for fun. And by the end of it, they had this adorable little sign that just made us tear up, where they took a picture on these railroad tracks and the focus was on this sign that said waiting for you. And they had these little baby shoes. And my mom and I just looked at each other and we were just like, okay, oh my goodness, and just started crying. And we were like, we have to get in contact with them. And it was really cool because as we started to look through the book again, we realized that we recognized her family, but not to the point where it was like too close to home, but to the point where we knew the family and the extended family, that we knew that this was a good family. They had good values. They had exactly what, I'd want my child to be raised in. And so that was like another key thing for us is we know this family, we know this extended family, and they are an amazing family. So the fact, getting to know the parents was even greater.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that you, again, had that like confirmation of peace as you went through. So many birth moms talk about having like the moment where they just knew, and they look at their mom or whoever they're with and they're like, okay, they're the ones.
Yep.
And you have so many cool connections with your son's adoptive parents, and like you shared those with me before, and it's so special to see how many connections he has with them and with you, and that's really great. So now that you have a family, your due date's coming up, how did you continue a relationship with them, and how did the rest of your pregnancy play out?
It was pretty good. There's that saying that the days feel like weeks and the weeks feel like days. And that's really how it was. Some days were harder than others, but it was really great. I mean, I think they sent out a Christmas card, so they'd ask me for a little ultrasound, and we would send them like baby bump pictures, and those are the only pictures I have from the time I was pregnant. Send it to them, and they were great. She came to visit, and I got to know her a little bit, and she ended up coming a month early before baby was supposed to be born, just in case, and her family lived there, so it was really good. But overall, they kept in contact. We talked a lot. It was really good.
Yeah, I can't imagine being an adoptive or a hopeful adoptive parent and anticipating the birth of the child, because I mean, not only as the mother are you like, are they going to come early? What's going to happen? But they're like, when do we need to book a flight? Because if they live far away, then it's kind of tricky. So yeah, that's awesome that she was able to be there, and the adoptive father was also able to be there shortly after, correct?
Yes, yeah, it was a crazy situation. He's in the military, so he has to get permission to leave base, and it ended up, due dates are not a permanent thing, and he ended up coming a lot earlier than we expected. And so I immediately had to call her, and I was like, you have to get your husband here. Like, I'm getting induced tomorrow morning at 7. Like, you have to get him here. And so it was a whole rush those couple days of him getting there, his father-in-law driving 3 hours to go get him. I'm pretty sure he sped all the way back home. And so it was great. I had my baby, and the father showed up 10 minutes later. So pretty sure he was just waiting for his dad to come.
Perfect timing. Love that. And so then you had some time in the hospital together before everything happens. Tell us about that.
It was interesting. He was born the day before my birthday. And so usually when I had a vaginal birth, usually you leave the day after. But I didn't want to always remember my birthday as the day I said goodbye. And so the hospital was really great, and they totally accommodated like an extra day. Like they were so sweet and like really understanding. They even brought me a cake with a candle that you couldn't light because it's in a hospital. So they were just so sweet and just so understanding, and it was great. I mean, he was never not with one of the families. You know, he was either with my family or with me or sleeping in my bed, or the adoptive parents, they were in another hospital room just around the corner and he was with them, or his grandparents, or, you know, I don't think he was ever put down or with any of them.
He was just so loved on those few days. And I mean, he's so loved on now, but yes. That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And so we celebrated my birthday with him, which was super sweet. And then the next day, I remember what time it was. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. And I just remember the nurse kind of telling me like, okay, these are your recovery instructions. And I like wasn't even paying attention because I was just so overwhelmed with what was about to happen. And I signed the adoption paperwork and finalized everything. And then everyone left the room and I just had a moment with him. And I just held him for a little bit. And I remember just like tracing his face with my finger so that I could just try and memorize every single little thing. And I took a sock and I took a little sock off his foot and I was like, I'm keeping this. And I took a little hat and I just remember looking at him and I was like, I'm ready. And I told him, I was like, I can do this. I'm ready. And so I put him in the basket and just rolled him down the hall. And I remember that feeling like the only way I can describe it is like the longest but shortest walk ever. It was probably 30 feet and yet it went by too fast, but it was just so many feelings that it was just all at once. It just felt so weird. And just wheeled him into his adoptive parents' room and handed him to her, gave her a huge hug and gave him one last huge kiss on the forehead and said goodbye. And I walked out of that room and I just started crying, and my dad just held me and I just sat and cried for a couple minutes and then went home. So yeah, it's weird. It's weird going to the hospital and having a baby and leaving without one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, like, I've carried you these 9 months and now I'm going to carry you these last 30 feet to your new family. And, you know, you're always going to be his family and his mom. And like, that's never going to change. After you gave birth and placed your baby, what does your relationship look like now? And how have you maintained that relationship?
It's really good. They were open to an open adoption, and I chose to do a semi-open adoption. I have this weird thing where I was like, I'd hate to see him and have him not recognize me. That would be that just for me would have been so difficult, for me to know him, but for him to think I'm a stranger, which is what I was. And so that I chose to do a semi-open adoption, but I also made sure that I left some things with him. I made a baby blanket for him and I wrote 2 different letters. I wrote one about the situation and why adoption is what I chose, and then I wrote one about his health and his family history's health and stuff like that, and threw some pictures in there. And that's actually the sweetest thing, because just this last year, his mom, we text all the time and she was like, yeah, he asks for your pictures. He knows who you are. He wants to see them. And he's not old enough yet to really read the letters and understand. But the fact that he knows who I am now is just like, it's so sweet. I had no idea that he knew who I was. And so I can see that relationship continuing to grow and hopefully one day meeting him. You know, my door is wide open, but it's open for him. And I'm not going to push myself on the family, you know, and so, although I know they'd be totally fine with that, but I just, you know, boundaries are a thing, and so.
Yeah. yeah, having that healthy relationship and understanding is so important. And like, I'm so grateful that nowadays we can just text and call and see over social media what's going on. And like, I had a few mementos from my mom that I like held on to when I was little, and it really gave me a lot of peace about my adoption. And I had a few mementos from my mom, and like, I held on to those so closely growing up. Those were things that whenever I had questions, like, I could turn to her through those letters and those pictures, and like, have something when I did have questions. So that's so special that he has that from you as well.
Yeah.
Even though we do have like social media and everything, like, he has you there.
Yeah, I look back and I'm like, all these high school pictures of me. Do I really want him to know that I looked like this? Like,
oh my goodness. Yeah, seeing my mom in like her 90s prom dress when she was like around the time that she got pregnant with me, I'm like, that's amazing. I love it so much.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is embarrassing. This is going to be like his first impression of me as my old Facebook pictures.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? Oh man. So moving forward, how did adoption shape your life and your career and your family nowadays?
I mean, it's what I do. My job, is this podcast, is talking to women who are considering adoption. I went into social work. I'm planning on getting my master's in adoption and different areas of adoption. And so it's completely shaped who I am. It's also shaped, it sounds weird, but it's also shaped more of my values and my standards. I mean, especially when it came to dating, I had to have my standards high, because if he wasn't accepting of the fact that I had a child out there who may be part of my life one day, then no matter how I felt about him, I had to think about that. And so I feel like my values and my standards kind of had to change as I got older and started dating again, and kind of got into the world. It's like, hey, how am I going to deal with this? Because he may be a part of my life one day, and someone needs to be okay with that, because if they're not, it's not going to work for me. So it's helped me, it's built my confidence to know that I went through something so hard, but so beautiful, and I made it and I did it, and he is so loved and he is safe and he is healthy and just the most beautiful boy. And so it's really just, it's built my confidence, and it's just literally shaped into what I want to do as a career.
Yeah, I love that. As beautiful as adoption can be, it's also like really hard. And, we don't turn away from that. We know that it's traumatic and difficult, and it's one of those things that's really, really hard. And I feel like whenever we face a challenging experience, we can go one of two ways. We can either embrace it and try and make the best of it, or we can let it consume us and destroy our lives. And it doesn't have to be that. Like, we can have the good and acknowledge the bad and just try and do what we can to have a better life. And help others through it as well.
Yeah, and the thing with that as well is the fact that you're gonna have good and bad days. So while adoption was hard and I've done my best to make it a beautiful thing, I also have those hard times where, it's like, this is a rough day, this sucks, this isn't great, and so it's that healthy balance of knowing, what your triggers are and, how to make it beautiful, but also accepting that there will be rough times.
Yeah, definitely. And during those rough times, like, you have support and you have options for help. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes none of those options work, but we figure it out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just ice cream and a movie with your best friend. And
exactly. Sometimes
other times
it's a good long therapy session.
Exactly. Exactly, man. So now you work in adoption. You help expectant moms make their adoption plans and get them started. What advice do you give to them and to other people who are facing the same things that you were facing?
I'd say get all the information you can. It truly is knowledge is power. That sentence when it comes to adoption is just so true. The more you know, the more prepared you are, the more you know what your support is, what your options are. That's why we did Adoption.org. We've been working on Adoption.org along with our awesome team on this step-by-step process on how to do that. And things like that are amazing and something I wish I had, because it's all the information you need about adoption in one spot that you can kind of do at your own pace, because it's really overwhelming. So to be able to have that resource that you can go back and forth to is something I wish I had. But also I was able to find different resources and information as I went along my journey. So my advice is literally to just get all the information you can. And then if adoption is what you choose and you place, I swear by counseling. I think it's something that helps you through that experience, because you're going to have a lot of big emotions and a lot of feelings that come with it. And being able to express that and talk to someone about it literally can make the biggest difference.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your story. These are vulnerable topics. It's really hard, and the world we live in can be really rough sometimes. So thank you so much for sharing and for serving so much in the adoption community. I know that your voice is so important, and that you're going to be able to help so many people from here on out. So
thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is an exciting journey for both of us to get started.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to kind of share and be vulnerable, because I think that's important, especially in this community.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to My Adoption. To have your adoption experience featured, please email info@myadoption.com. If you're pregnant and considering adoption or looking for adoption support, call or text 1-800-236-7898.